Well, hello there, and welcome to our live cast today. I'm excited today because I've got someone very special with us, and that is Reyne O'Shaughnessy. Reyne is a commercial airline pilot, and she has written really a fantastic and important book called This Is Your Captain Speaking: What You Should Know About Your Pilot's Mental Health. Now, this is an interesting topic, and this is why I'm excited. I'm a private pilot myself, and I get it. And it makes, we have this question of you get on an airplane, you trust that the pilot and co-pilot are going to do an absolutely fantastic job. And of course, on almost every occasion, they do. But what's their mental health like? What have they got going on in their lives? And will that have some impact? And is the aviation industry doing a great job of protecting pilots' mental health? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And so let's get right into it. Oh, actually, first, the book is available today on Kindle for 99 cents. You can get the Kindle version of the book for 99 cents. The paperback is also available on Amazon, but it's at retail and the Kindle's at 99 cents. So pick up that. All right, Reyne, I am excited to bring you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. Happy to be here, and thanks for saying all those nice things about me.
Well, you deserve them, and this is an exciting day. I mean, this is the book launch day, right? How many times in your life does this come
Mm,
around?
Indeed, and a very exciting day.
So, Reyne, I have had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last several months, but our audience hasn't. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Where do you
Mm,
come from?
yeah.
And how do you get to the point where you're writing a book about mental health awareness in aviation?
Yeah, it's quite the journey, and it makes me sound very old, Everett, but
No, no, no.
well, I grew up in a northeast mid-Atlantic state, Pennsylvania, and small city called Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Grew up in a very traditional family, mother, father. I had a brother. My father came home every day at 5:30. We had dinner on the table, and it was a very calming, very script kind of upbringing. But I've always had a different I always walked to a different beat, even when I was a young girl. My mother tells this story about, the crayon story. She calls it, and I'll just share just a little bit of it with you. The crayon story is, um, she kn she w I love to color, and she would buy me these 64 packs of Crayola crayons. I'm sure there are some people in the audience today that could relate to those, the ones with that had little crayon sharpener, in the pack. And, she noticed that the crayons would break and, that's okay, but she also noticed that my crayons were leaving the pack and they were disappearing. So when she took a little closer look at me and watched my behavior, she realized that I was putting them in my pockets and in my little purse when I would go to school because I was giving away my best crayons. So she really identified my servant's heart, and she kind of fed that as every time my Crayola crayon box was empty, she would buy another one. And then when that was empty, she would buy another one, and that's kind of a segue into why I wrote the book. I have a servant's heart, and in the airline industry for 35 years, I have a unique and up close perspective of mental health in the airline industry, and through this experience, I felt the calling. I felt a servant's heart to give the voice to the voiceless. When pilots are seeking mental health treatment, their hands are their hands are tied. And even though new policies have been enacted to address the barriers that pilots face in seeking treatment, not only for mental health treatment, but for physical health treatment, there's so much work that needs to be done. So I felt my writing a book was an important contribution to the discussion surrounding pilot mental health and a step forward in the conversation about what the future of aeromedical health should look like. So basically, through my 3 years, 3 decades of industry experience and tens of thousands of hours talking with pilots, I've used my unique perspective in this book to help others understand the landscape of the barriers and obstacles that pilots face in the industry.
Well, and I mean, this is a big deal, right? Obviously, you've got that, if I remember right, Condor plane that, that the pilot or co-pilot crashed into a mountain, and I think there was talk about it being a suicide by pilot or
Mm,
something, which is just terrifying. You've got the flight that disappeared in the Indian Ocean, and they don't
mm,
know, right?
yeah.
They don't know if that had something to do with mental health. And yet we board planes every day, and we trust that the systems are in place,
Mhm,
that the pilot's going to get us from point A to point B, the airplane's going to work, the air traffic control system's going to work. All of these things are just going to work.
mhm,
And what it of course is wonderful is 99.99% of the time that's exactly true. All those systems work just great, or so we think. But tell me, what happens now if a pilot, you know, you and I've had some conversations about mental health in aviation and the stigma that goes
mhm.
with any discussion of mental health. Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. First of all, pilot mental health is not a popular subject to talk about. And so coming out, so to speak, being the voice of the voiceless, is a bold move. But, globally and roughly, there's 264 million people who suffer from depression. And according to the WHO, fewer than half of those with depression around the world seek treatment. However, pilots are no different than the general public, and we suffer just like anyone else. So, between 2016 and 2017, the pilot mental health is finally getting, the attention that it deserves. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that every pilot out there has a diagnosable mental illness or mental condition. However, everyone has mental health, and we should be taking care of ourselves the way or our mental health, the way we take care of our physical health. A matter of fact, I'll just read you something out of the book. I won't tell you too much, but I write in the book a 2018 front page poll in the USA Today listed airline pilots as the third most stressful professions behind active duty military personnel and first responders. Another recent large scale study revealed 13% of pilots met the criteria for depression, and 4.1% considered suicide in the previous 2 weeks. And if we think about that, if an airline has 5,000 crew members, there are potentially 675 of them that can be qualified as being depressed. And between 2 and 5 of them would potentially fall inside the potential suicide category. So it's no wonder that airlines don't want to talk about this issue because it would just frankly frighten the hell out of the public.
Yeah, no kidding. What page is that on your book?
That's page 24.
Page 24. Okay.
Mhm,
Um, I ask because I think that reinforces people need to get this book, because it is stunning, right? It's just
mhm,
so stunning. And yet everyone has, mental health is a challenge for everybody everywhere. And but even more so for pilots. And yet what happens if a pilot says to their employer, "Hey, I'm really struggling with depression. Can we talk?"
mm.
What happens when that happens?
Yeah, great question. Not only does it tag you to the chief pilot or whomever you're having the discussion with, but pilots, unlike other professions, lawyers, doctors, well, ATC controllers as well. We have to go through every 6 months, we have to get a physical, and we go to an aeromedical examiner, and he specializes in pilot aviation. And we go through this whole battery of tests. And part of the test is the question, how are you doing? And so the basic answer that pilots give is, I'm doing good. Because if they start talking about, hey, I'm suffering from, oh, I don't know, in insomnia, if I'm suffering from a divorce, or I'm not I'm starting to drink too much, that aerodynamic or that aeromedical examiner, by his license, he has to report that to the FAA. And the danger with that is that once you are reported to the FAA, then you are tagged. And if you are tagged, you are really revealing yourself, and you're putting yourself in danger, in jeopardy of potentially losing your livelihood. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And that's the conundrum. Pilots can't seek mental health treatments without putting their livelihood on the line. And quite frankly, who wants to do that? For example, I'll use me. I suffer from anxiety. And this form that you fill out every 6 months before you go into the aero medical examiner says, do you suffer from anxiety? Well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. I can fly an ILS Cat 3 down to 50 feet with icy runways and crosswinds and not break a sweat. But ask me to put a contact in my eye, and I go into these gyrations, my hands start sweating, I hyperventilate. I suffer from anxiety. Is it disabling? No, but the awareness that I have it allows me to put tools in my toolbox to use. So when I go in for my FAA physical and they ask me, do I suffer from anxiety? It puts me in a position to not be very truthful, does it? And that's just one example. I mean, the form talks about anxiety, chronic stress, asthma. Um, so it really does, you know, handcuff the pilots to whether they want to tell the truth or whether they want to put their livelihood on the line.
So, Renee, what do you think is the solution or a solution to improve this situation?
Um, it's not going to happen overnight. We're starting the discussion. The discussion has been evolving, but I think the more we can normalize mental health, it's interesting. We've come a very far away from the 1950s, where mental health was stigmatized, and luckily for us, that was the right thing to do. But if we think about it, we could talk about gut health, we could talk about skin health, we could talk about toe health, foot health, and no one thinks twice about it. But when you take the word mental health and you put those two words together, automatically people think of it in a negative way, and they attach a stigma to it. So I think the first step is writing a book like mine, getting it out to the public, um, normalizing the conversation around mental health in aviation, because right now, mental health is a very taboo subject.
Yeah, and that's the first thing that's got to be broken, right? Is remove that from being taboo.
Absolutely. None of us are eager to disclose deeply personal information. And pilots that believe that pilots believe that being vulnerable or sharing feelings or emotion would be at best, humiliating or embarrassing, and at worst, the end of their flying career. So they keep quiet and they go underground, and putting off doing anything about it until they can hardly function.
Which just makes it worse,
And
right?
absolutely, which makes it worse until they're forced to do action, and that usually happens through an incident or an accident where now they have to tell their family, they have to tell their company, they have to tell the FAA, they have to tell everyone when they could have taken care of matters, prior to the incident or accident, and we could have had a better outcome. So, yeah.
No. Now, I know that every author has a couple sections of their book that they are like, okay, I know these are some of my most poignant points.
Yeah.
Is there something you'd like to share? Is there a favorite part of your book or part of your book that you'd like to read from that you think is really important for us?
Well, one part of the book that kind of wrote itself was my story. My story, and I'll just, without giving the book away or without giving my story away, I'll just read you a few paragraphs on my story.
Well, actually, while you're doing that, let me quickly do this. Everybody remember that you can pick up This Is Your Captain Speaking on Amazon today. And as a launch special, the Kindle is available for 99 cents. Recommend everybody pick that up. And by the way, if you are not a Kindle reader, like let's say you're like a physical book reader, that's fantastic. Get the physical book. But it will tell you that the Kindle version for 99 cents, you can read it on every smartphone, on every tablet, on every laptop or desktop computer, in addition, of course, to Kindle devices. And if you pick up that Kindle today, you'll actually really help amplify this message because the more that happens on the first day of the book's launch, the more likely it is to set a trajectory for the book and for the message. So I'd highly encourage you to do that. Okay, Reyne, coming back to you.
All right, thank you. Well, I talk about having my aha moment and my come to Jesus moment when I had my breakdown, and when the doctor told me that I was suffering from hypertension and anxiety. So that was 15 years ago, and I won't go and tell you the details about the story, my aha moment, because then there won't be anything to pique your curiosity about my story. But there's one part of the book at the end of my story, and I'll just summarize it by saying, for decades, I pushed myself beyond my physical and mental limitations. I viewed my body as a disobedient servant. It took me a while to break those habits in the mental thinking of how I approached my body in order to value it for the glorious work that it does and the enabling of my physical presence in the world. To shift my mindset from instructing a disobedient servant to listening to an integrated and valuable partner worthy of time, caring, and compassion. It has been a process. And I share this because by changing your mindset, your habits don't necessarily change overnight. It's simple, but not easy. So I say that because everyone has a story. And the key is finding the key that works for you. And before, not every mental health condition needs medication. So I talk about that in my book about, 4 pillars in my book that I recommend that really saved my life.
What are, Reyne, what are those 4 pillars?
The 4 pillars are sleep and relaxation, exercise and movement, nutrition, and relationships. And we talk about stress quite a bit in the book.
Excellent. Um, Tell me, as you look forward, if you in a perfect world, what would you see happen with mental health in aviation? And let's say the next 5 years.
Mm.
If you could look forward and go, I would love to see this, what would it be?
It would be, let's be honest. Pilots don't trust their company. They don't trust their union, and they sure as hell do not trust their aeromedical examiner. So we have to build trust, first of all. So, how do we build trust in a perfect world, in an ideal world? Well, I don't have the answers. I only have the questions. But as a first step, or maybe one of the steps, I would like to see the FAA give all pilots amnesty to come forward if they have any type of condition that they need help with. This would be the time, or a time, that they could come forward, talk about whatever is ailing them with no fear of losing their job. I think once the FAA would see the numbers that would come forward, they might change the policy. And if the public would get behind in wanting to know if our pilots are mentally fit as well as technically fit, and maybe instead of reactive programs, which we have in every airline, and they do a wonderful job, and we have peer-to-peer groups in every airline, and they do a wonderful job, and we put a lot of money toward those resources. In a perfect world, I would like to see some of those resources reallocated to preventative measures. Let's start talking about preventative measures. Let's give our pilots some tools that they could put in their toolbox: sleep, relaxation, exercise, nutrition, stress, relationships. Let's start talking. It's ironic that through our education and our titles and our masters and our PhDs and all of these things that we have worked for all through our life, no one has really ever taught us how to take care of our mental health. So if we're able to reallocate some of these services and the monies to preventative rather than reactive programs, I wonder what impact that would have with a change of the FAA legislation, how that would impact mental health and how safer the skies would be.
And you kind of wonder what wake up call is really necessary to bring about this change, right? There are documented accidents that weren't accidents. There are documented accidents that are accidents, but came about because of such issues. And what more really is needed.
Absolutely. In the first chapter of the book, excuse me, Everett, the first chapter, page 12, I talk about JetBlue Flight 191, American Airlines Flight 736, Malaysia Flight 370, German Wings Flight 9525, FedEx Flight 705, Delta Flight 1728, JetBlue 584, JetBlue 1052. These are just a sampling of airline accidents and incidents that make the headlines. But quite frankly, there are many situations that happen on a daily basis that don't hit the airline, but yet compromise the safety of a flight.
This is quite sobering. That's why I'm grateful that you've honestly had the guts to
Mm,
write the book.
yeah.
Let's face it. This may not make you some people's best friend, right? But I also know that you have decided that this is just far more important than any of that. But you've been bucking trends for a long
Mhm.
time. This is not the first time you've bucked a trend in the aviation world.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me, we kind of skipped over this earlier, but how did you get into aviation in the in the first place, especially knowing that, well, we don't see a lot of female aviation pilots
Yeah.
today, let alone when you were starting. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It goes back to that comment that I made about the crayons. I was always very unique, and I I didn't march to the normal drum. So as a young girl, well, my friends were out doing age-appropriate things, I was inside and cleaning my mother's house or reading books or watching black and white movies, and I remember my mother saying, "Why can't you just be like the normal girls?" You know, "The normal girls are wearing lipstick and running around with boys," and I just never fit that mold. So I grew up as a young woman, and then, in my 20s, I think I mentioned to you at one time, you know, there's 2 learners. There's the learner that comes out of the womb, and he or she knows exactly what they wanna do, and they're a jackhammer. Boom, 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 boom. They know exactly. My first son knew since he was 7 years old that he wanted to be a lawyer. But then there's the other learners that they take, a different route. They're more of a hummingbird, and they take nectar from this flower and this flower, but somehow they find their passion, and that was me. You know, back in the 1970s, women didn't have passions, they didn't have professions, they had jobs. So as I evolved into, young adulthood, my curiosity got the best part of me, and I still wasn't stepping in, you know, in beat to the other women who were doing all those wonderful things, all those, you know, all those wonderful things, getting married, having babies, and those are all wonderful things, and being a nurse or a school teacher, and I was just floundering until I took my first flight lesson at a local FBO not too far from me, and they had a wonderful program. It was a community college, and believe it or not, the government was giving, aid, and for every flight hour, they would pay 70% of the flight
Wow.
time. So, yeah,
Wow.
so I took my first flight, and I knew I was destined, even though women pilots were not in the scene right now. You know, back in the day, today's women, they're busy, and as they should be, kicking down glass ceilings. You know, 40 some years ago, we weren't kicking down glass ceilings, we were kicking down walls.
Yeah, just
So
to get in.
yeah, just
Yeah.
to get in. So against all odds, I put everything into it, and I got all my license within, you know, a year and a half, and got hired at a commuter, and, you know, the rest is history.
Wow. Um, so yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's like the whole challenge. And even today, do you have any idea what percentage of pilots are female?
Um,
Commercial pilots?
yes, there's approximately, 660,000 pilots, in worldwide, and there are less than 1% of female pilots.
Wow.
Yeah, it's you know, it's tough for women who want to enter into aviation because, you know, they want it all. They might want a family, and, you know, flying around the world for 2 weeks at a time is not conducive to family life, and so you have to make, you know, a choice whether you want career or whether you want a family, for example. So, you know, I was a trailblazer, and there's a handful of us that were trailblazers 40, 47 years ago, you know, 30 years ago, and by far, we did not have it easy. I mean, there's so much discrimination out there, and today's woman, or a woman that wants to pursue a career in aviation, they have it easier than my generation did, but they still don't have it easy. It's a tough road. So if we want to bring more women into aviation, we have to change the culture. We have to change the culture, and provide more programs that will allow them to, enter into the field of aviation, and that might be, you know, the union might have to negotiate shorter trips for those women who can't be away for 2 weeks at a time. So, you know, it opens a whole discussion point.
Well, it's interesting too because I think we're at a time right now where, right, aren't they talking about a lack of pilots?
Mm,
Um,
absolutely.
they're they're scrambling to make up for all the pilots they furloughed or that
Mm.
retired early last year, and um, So you're scrambling to make up for lack of pilots. Well, why don't we also encourage more women to be in those ranks of pilots and to facilitate that? Your discussion brought up that other point about how difficult it is to have a family in a traditional sense
Mhm.
while being an airline pilot. Even being a commuter airline pilot, right, where you're running shorter legs and you're home more frequently, is still super hard. It's kind of like, people who are, police officers and firefighters and things like that. They talk about the stresses that places on family life because of their schedule. Airline's worse, and international airline is
Right.
even is way worse. So
Absolutely.
combine those challenges with a stigma of mental health, and it just seems like a recipe for disaster. Putting
Absolutely.
all that together.
Absolutely, and that's why, we talk in the book about the stresses of the profession. We know the pitfalls. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of pilots. I interviewed 100 pilots just within last year while I was writing this book, and served on volunteer committees. So and talked to mental health professionals that are focused on the aviation community, and we're suffering. We're suffering, and until we can talk about it and get it out in the open and put in programs in place and change some of the organization policies, w it's a very high performance, high demanding profession.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Renee, thank you so much for taking the time to write the book, first and foremost, doing the hard work, and being willing to be brave and to step out into the middle of this
Yeah.
touchy subject. I'm grateful that you've taken the time to do that. And then thanks for coming on the live cast today and helping us to uh, make this issue more aware and to celebrate the launch of your book. So I'm gonna plug your wonderful book one more time, and then we're gonna say goodbye.
Alright.
And so I want to
Can
encourage.
can I
Oh, go
just
ahead.
say just one more thing before we go? Do we have time?
Absolutely, it's your interview.
Thank you. Who did I write this book for? I'm asked that all the time. I wrote the book for the public, the policymaker, the pilot, and the curious. It's for anyone who's interested in making safer skies. And my readers, what I want them to take away from the book is that pilots struggle with mental health more than is realized. And we need to take a closer look at the current legislation and put into place, you programs surrounding mental health. Um, and that's what I want them to take away from the book, that mental health, we need to normalize it and really take a closer look in what aeromedical mental health could be in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Renee. And I want to encourage everybody, go ahead and pick up your copy of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Again, it's available on Amazon today, and the Kindle version is on a special promotion for 99 cents. Um, it's an exciting time, but it's also a challenging time. So definitely recommend you pick this up. And particularly if you know anybody in the aviation world, get this for them. Let them read it. Let them share it. This needs to become part of the discussion to improve mental health. I'm grateful again for you being here today, watching this or listening to this or listening to the podcast of it. Thank you very much again for joining us. I'm Everett O'Keefe from Ignite Press. If there's anything we can ever do to help you get your message out to the world through a book, please let us know. Please, in fact, you can always visit us at ignitepress.us. If you've got an idea for a book, we'd be happy to talk about it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you the next time.